to the District 9 Forum on Housing and Transportation in the budget, Austin. Thank you. Here, moderating for us today is Jack Craver. He is a local journalist. He has a wonderful newsletter called the Austin Politics Newsletter. If you are not subscribed, you should be.
AustinPolitics.net.
AustinPolitics.net, thank you very much. And I'll let him introduce all of our wonderful candidates and everything else. Take it away, Jack.
Oh no, I think we'll just do. I think we'll do normal voices, with the exception of Zoe, who couldn't make it tonight because he tested positive for COVID. We all wish him a speedy recovery. And so I think when it's Zoe's time, we have his campaign here who will play a pre-recorded answer to some of these questions. So it's not ideal, but we appreciate him making the effort.
We're doing our best.
Yeah. So I think we're just going to, right off the bat, we'll give each candidate 3 minutes to just introduce themselves, tell us a little about their campaign and their vision for District 9. I think we'll just start right here from left to right. Joah?
Okay. Stand up if that's okay, and then I'll sit down for the rest.
Sure.
How you doing, everyone? My name is Joah Spearman, and I'm really glad that we switched this to this location because I live 4 blocks away. Yeah, so honestly, I just want to start by saying thank you to Aura, Rethink 35, Downtown Austin Neighborhood Association, everyone else who put this together. This is really important, and if you're in this room, it's because you're already leaning into being engaged and being interested in this. I really appreciate it. What can I say? I mean, I live in this neighborhood, I live in this part of town, and my story in Austin has happened here in this part of town. I'm from Killeen, just 55 or so miles up the street, and I came to Austin in 2001 to go to the University of Texas. I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college, and I grew up in scarcity. I am the youngest of 3 boys, single mom, working 2-3 jobs my whole childhood, and so I lived in scarcity the first 18 or so years of my life. And when I came to Austin, so I very much relate to someone living check to check, week to week, food stamps, all that stuff. And so when I came to Austin, having my own dorm room, eating on campus, honestly, Austin was my introduction to living in abundance. And so a lot of why I'm running for city council is because I've lived the last 20 years of my life here in Austin in the abundance of this city and this district in a lot of ways. I mean, that's not true for everyone, but it's definitely been a lot of my experience. And honestly, if you're probably in here, you probably have a little bit more exposure to abundance than some others as well. And I've been a witness to so many changes here in Austin in which more people have, whether that's homelessness, whether that's things around food insecurity, we're building a city in which, yes, we're attracting a lot of people who want to live in the abundance of Austin, but we're also creating the conditions that are creating scarcity for more and more Austinites every day, whether that's police officers, EMS workers, service industry professionals like baristas or bartenders. And so I'm running because we're talking about abundance for housing and transit, and housing and transit to me are the 2 levers that the city has the most influence on in terms of creating abundance and creating a place where people who are maybe living check to check, week to week, can still experience abundance, whether that's in having more housing availability and optionality, or having access to public transit. So I'm running because I do believe in an abundant Austin, and having lived in scarcity for a large part of my life, I know that the city can actively do things to create more abundance for more people in the city. So thank you.
How's it going, y'all? I'm Ben Leffler. I grew up in Austin, Texas. My folks moved here in 1981 for my dad to go to the University of Texas. And like so many others who came to Austin, they loved it, and they decided to make a family here. And they raised me and my 3 brothers in Central Austin, first in District 9 in Cherrywood. And these were all working class neighborhoods at that point. And so even though my folks did not make a lot of money, they were able to raise us 4 boys and give us an opportunity to experience all of the amazing parts of Austin. access to great public schools, to green spaces, to, the abundance of this city. And it's only gotten cooler since then. It's gotten so much better. Before I go on, I want to see a show of hands. How many people here know someone who has moved out of Austin because of the cost of living? How many people have seen their rents go up in the last 2 years? I'm running for office because of that. I'm running for this seat because if we cannot afford to live in this city, if we can't have working class people in this city, then we lose everything that makes it special. And right now we have this incredible opportunity. We talk about this as a crisis, but there's never been a better time to build housing and transit. Gas is $5 a gallon, y'all, and housing's through the roof. Like now, all of the things that we talked about in the Imagine Austin plan, which passed almost exactly 10 years ago, tomorrow I think, we still don't have a compact connected city because we haven't updated our code, because we haven't made some hard decisions, and they are hard decisions, there are trade-offs, but right now, everybody is feeling the crunch. When I first started my campaign just a year ago, I was advised by housing advocates, like, maybe you don't want to talk about housing. It's too polarizing. District 9, maybe they don't want to talk about housing. You can't go anywhere in this city right now without people talking about housing. Whether you're at the grocery store or knocking on the doors, everybody's feeling the crunch. And that's a serious issue, but it's also a huge opportunity. Look how many people are in this room today. There was not that many people at the last candidate forum for AURA that I went to. And thank you to the organizations that are hosting this. And look at AURA, it's being run by young folks in this town. There is such an energy around this. And so that's why I'm running, because now is the time we get to choose if Austin is a place for everyone, that everyone can afford to be in. Because that's the Austin that I grew up in, and that's the Austin that I want my son to grow up in. So thanks for having me here. This is awesome.
Hey y'all, it's good to see you. A lot of familiar faces and many more people who I have not met, which is great to see new people here working on, interested in your community. My name's Tom Wald. I am a resident of Cherrywood. I've been in Austin for 22 years now, and I'm originally from just up the highway, but way up the highway from Minneapolis. As soon as I got to Austin, I very quickly wanted to get involved with the community, so I found a housing co-op to live in. And that was such a transformative experience. One of the things I learned there was how to work. Well, we had to make consensus decisions there, so we had to get everyone on board, maybe -1, but then we had to wait 30 days for it. So imagine if you had a group of 30 people trying to make a consensus decision. So we never painted the walls. So after that, I connected with people in the community, and I frankly took a few years before I really got involved with local issues on a political level. It wasn't until 2006 that I started getting involved with transportation. I think those who know me, I've been very much involved with transportation since then. I just can't stop. I'm not satisfied when good decisions are being made at our city. So since then, I've been working doggedly to make sure that people have access to be able to bike and people are able to walk. And then when people are in wheelchairs, they don't go down a sidewalk a couple hundred feet and then discover there's no way out. The only way that is coming back the way they came from. And so I was happy to join a bike organization and help bring that into being a staffed organization, raising money for that, and that was Bike Austin, now reinvented into Safe Streets Austin. I've served in a number of nonprofits, Walk Austin, which was instrumental in us getting to see our 100th, this is a wonky term, but pedestrian hybrid beacon. So if you're on a street and you're crossing mid-block and there's a signal, you can push a button, that's a pedestrian hybrid beacon. Walk Austin was instrumental. Before that, there were only a few of them. Walk Austin insisted that there be funding for that, specifically called out in a bond election. I believe that was 2016. On from there, founded Red Line Parkway Initiative. So Red Line Parkway Initiative supports the 32-mile trail that will go along the Capital Metro Rail Red Line from downtown Austin up to Leander. It was part of the vote in 2004 for the Red Line Metro Rail. And the idea there is, yes, it could be a trail. You can walk, you bike, but you can also live on it. You can take transit on it. And it's a way of recreating our city from the inside out with affordable housing, with green space, and making people be able to thrive in that sort of lifestyle. That's a little bit about my experience. I mean, other things I will mention, I've continued to serve on the People United for Mobility Action Board. We were instrumental in achieving the $300 million of anti-displacement funding as part of Project Connect. It's a huge accomplishment, first time in the country, anything close to that, on the board of Austin Outside. But I wanted to, all that transportation work, one of the things that is my takeaway from 10 years ago, I was at a National Bike Summit. The head of the National Organization of Women was talking about bicycling and making, the whole point is the bike summit is how to get more people biking, right? And so they asked her, and she said, well, the infrastructure is great, bike lanes is great, but really, if you can't live near your job as a woman, you're not going to be biking to work. If you live 10 miles out, you're probably not going to be biking to work. So she was saying land use is actually pretty important. Housing, affordable housing near opportunity is important. And that really is the zeitgeist over time. Housing is just so critically important right now. There's so much opportunity we have at the city council and in our community to change policies. That's what's energized me. And I want to make sure that we have someone on council who's ready day one to take on those things, to know how, yes, you can pass a resolution with 6 votes, 9 votes, whatever, but you still need to go after it. You need to talk to the city staff. You need to know who those community leaders are who support you and the ones who don't necessarily support you, because they sometimes can be brought along with tweaks, or you can just at least know who they are and just make sure your supporters have more numbers, right? Other than housing, transportation is going to continue to be important. We have a lot of momentum. $500 million for active transportation, everyone. $8 billion. How much is Project Connect? It's ongoing funding, but it's billions of dollars.
Recently expanded.
So it's several $1 billion for Project Connect, but that's not a certainty. We have to make sure that it actually gets built. Beyond that, the other important thing for me is just that this has already been mentioned by both my fellow candidates here. We need to have an Austin that continues to allow people of all backgrounds to live here, and that's income, that's race, that's even with the pressures at the state level. It's to ensure that transgender people feel safe here too. We're gonna really feel a storm of pressure in the next few years, and we need to make sure that our city's ready for it. I don't want to say that, but we have to protect the people in Austin, right? And that's reproductive rights as well. So I'm going to wrap it up and just say that one of the big reasons I decided to run is because I want to make sure that people had an opportunity to vote for someone who has experience working on issues, has been not sitting still for the last 16 years and just can't stop helping the city. And I ask for your vote humbly. I appreciate it.
I'll now play Zoe's intro. Apologies if the audio doesn't work. We're about to start. Let's see this happen live too.
All right.
My name is Joah Qadri, and I'm a candidate for Austin City Council here in District 9. I want to thank everyone in attendance, both in person and virtually, for attending this extremely important event on housing and transportation. Y'all make this city what it is, and y'all deserve and must be a part of the conversations as we work towards solutions. I also just want to thank the many hosts for putting on this event. I've been in Austin for over 13 years now. It's a city where I got educated, where I met my wife, where I got married, and where I started a family. It's a great city with such beautiful character and opportunities, and truly you can't find that anywhere else in this country. And it's this deep love of Austin that inspired me to run and see that we need a better city that works for everyone. Whether you've lived here for generations, or you've just moved to the city because of an incredible opportunity to attend school here, or you just landed your dream job. But even with this love comes a realization that we as a city are failing our most vulnerable communities. We're in a housing crisis. We deal with a lack of equitable transportation, and there's just a general lack of equity in the city that affects so many communities. And we must do better. We have to do better. So though I unfortunately cannot be there in person as I tested positive for COVID, unfortunately, on Sunday, I want to recognize the importance of the neighborhood this forum is taking place where y'all are sitting. Clarksville is the oldest thriving freedom town in the United States west of the Mississippi River. And the study of its gentrification and relationship to racial urban development is essential historical framework to look through as we have the essential conversation on housing and transit today. It's still extremely important, and I want everyone just to take in where we are and where we need to go. The campaign that I'm running, that we're running, is a campaign run on values of empathy and service. And that's a staple of this campaign, and it's a mantra that we live by on a day-to-day basis. And I'm humbled to have the support of endorsements from state reps like James Tallarico and Donna Howard and Cheryl Cole, but also organizations like Grassroots Law Project, and the policy distinction from Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, recognizing our intersectional and intentional policy platforms. So I apologize again for not being able to be there in person, but I look forward to connecting with anyone interested on a one-on-one level and having extended conversations on these subjects once I'm out of quarantine. My amazing team is actually there today, and they've been tabling and will continue to table. They also have business cards, which have my email and my phone number. So feel free to shoot me a text, feel free to send me an email. I want to hear from all of y'all. Out of everything that I've done as a candidate so far, my most favorite thing is having those one-on-one conversations. So I look forward to hearing from y'all, and thank you guys so much once again for being here today, and once again, thank you to our host for hosting this extremely important forum.
Thank you.
All right, let's get into the weeds. All right, let's get into the weeds a little bit. We got the first question is from Farm and City, and I guess this time I'll just go back the other direction. So just our region's going to grow from 2 to 4 million people, and most of these will be people of color. And I guess this is just, you all talk about the need for abundance of housing. So just give us a sense, maybe in a minute, like what are the actual policy levers that we pull to allow people the option to live in healthy, low carbon lifestyles and dense walkable places with frequent access to transit?
Keep it to 60 seconds.
Yeah, let's try. Let's try that.
Okay. I'm going to stand up just because I think it's easier to hear. So there's a lot we can do at the Austin level and a lot we can do at the metro level, the Campo level. So when we're thinking of people being able to have walkable, bikeable neighborhoods, access to transit, and have it be affordable, there's a few things. So we absolutely need to update our land use code to allow for more housing types throughout the city. We also need to continue to build out the investment that I mentioned for active transportation. At the Campo level, we have some levers to pull as well. So there we can, some people might be surprised, but there's a lot of sort of like-minded thinking from suburban mayors. They want to see more walkable, bikeable neighborhoods too, areas too, connected to transit. And so we can build allyships with them and transform how our state and federal money is spent on transportation for the whole metro, and help people in Austin and in other places around the Austin area be walkable and bikeable. And I'm gonna wrap up to other things. Yeah, I can say more on housing later. We'll keep it at that.
All right, Ben.
So I really appreciate this question was framed as like a regional issue, because as Austin has grown, all the little towns around Austin, well, no longer little towns, but they're growing even faster. And so I think we need a sort of regional strategic growth plan. We know Austin doubles almost clockwork every 20 years, so I think that we can do a lot of things around that. For the code, I mean, specific things, we'll read your newsletters, this is kind of funny, but I mean, raising the number of the site plan threshold above 2, I don't know the exact number, but 12 is being kicked around. Compatibility requirements, those things are really onerous to creating dense walkable areas. Transit-oriented development, especially around our rail lines. Public transit should probably be free for everyone. If we want folks on the bus, why are we not, we subsidize cars, we should subsidize our public transportation. And then if we want folks to be in those communities, we need to make sure they have access to good food. There's a lot of food deserts around, especially with low income communities. So, there's ideas around community food pantries, places people can walk and don't have to get into a car. I think that's 60 seconds.
All right.
I'm thinking about this really at the individual and political level, and I say that because I actually, we're all, I think, going to be saying that we desperately need to update our land development code, but that's also not the solution to everything. And what I mean by that is we have a lot of issues in this city around accountability, and we have an Imagine Austin plan that was passed 10 years ago. We have this desire for complete communities where people can walk to work or maybe walk to the grocery store and all these things, but we haven't really implemented those things in action. So we have these fancy plans and we don't have an accountability lined up. And I think in District 9, I think we've seen a lot of that actually, where we have had representation that has not been the kind of champion that we need around affordability, around equity, and around, honestly, I would say this is a misnomer in a lot of ways, but the word accessibility, when I think about that, I also think about having the kind of district representation where you don't have to hire a lobbyist to go get a meeting with their council member. And so I think that accountability is actually going to be the #1 thing that you're going to need to get out of a District 9 representative to make sure that we're enacting the kind of policies to create an ecosystem where we can go to the individual person in Austin and say, hey, would you mind biking? Can you reduce your carbon footprint? How can we ask individuals to be accountable if the people in office and elected who signed up and said, I want to do this job aren't being accountable? So that's where I would start.
All right, so try to keep it to 60 seconds.
This is a great question. Participate in this conversation. As we grow as a city, we must meet our growing transportation needs. We must ensure that Project Connect gets built in a timely and equitable manner so that Austinites will be able to access high-quality, frequent public transit services. We know that transportation and mobility policy doesn't exist in a vacuum, and our goals for reforming city and regional policy to ensure every Austinite can access reliable transportation is also in line with our Vision Zero goals. To get there, we must invest in infrastructure like safe bus shelters, including coverings, benches, and lighting that are essential to cultivating a less car-dependent culture in Austin by making our bus infrastructure accessible, especially in hot summer like we're enduring right now. We must also expand city and regional policy to make Austin more bike and pedestrian friendly, from expanding protected bike lanes and safe street programs to emulating successful programs like the e-bike tax credit proposal Denver recently enacted.
He's got more, but we kept it to 60 seconds.
Oh, thank you. That's fair. All right, I appreciate that. All right, we'll start over here with Joah. Or I guess we'll start with Ben. This one comes from the West Campus Neighborhood Association. So it's talked about how the community engagement process at the city is very much centered around affluent single-family homeowners who have the time and resources to engage with the city. How can the process be reformed to better account for the needs of low-income, historically underrepresented demographics, such as students who often bear the burdens?
Well, I mean, I think there's no surprise why, certain areas of town seem to have better representation on council, and it's because of that. They can go and they can sit down for 12 or sometimes more hours at City Hall, and therefore their voices are heard. And so I think we need to, do both as individual offices, holding office hours out in the community, but then also explore potentially having the city council meetings maybe rotate out away from City Hall. We know that getting more voices involved is going to create more representative policies, and that's not just students, that's pretty much anybody who's not west of Lamar at this point, kind of. And then for students specifically, there's a lot of stuff that we can do around housing and helping them actually live near campus so they can be on transit lines and then come down to City Hall if they so choose. There's a lot of stuff going on West Campus. The density bonus programs have done a really good job there. I think that's a good model for other areas if we can work around the compatibility issues and parking requirements.
Joah?
All of these questions, they are human questions to me, and what I mean by that is in Austin, we do this thing where we talk about an issue, and we immediately start talking about real estate, building types, structures. Do we want this or that? And oftentimes we forget the people. I think students have been a part of that. We talk about West Campus, for example, and we're not talking about the people. We're in this kind of hurry to start talking about, oh, they've allowed this and this is happening. And for me, I think all policy should be centered around people. I think essential workers in the city, for example, Austin Water Department, EMS, fire, police, they're all understaffed, in part because of the affordability issues in the city. Students are facing issues around mental health, for example, because even though they have the density in West Campus, there are some things that have been built there that aren't necessarily suitable for student living. So I think all these issues need to be centered around people. And so the only way you can really come to a situation with empathy and ability to really serve is by being accessible to the community yourself. So I very much, you mentioned having office hours out in the community. I would be a big proponent of that. I actually think a lot of people need to know who the city manager in the city is. And I actually, even more so than having the city council meetings traveling around, I actually think council should create a mechanism in which the city manager and that team needs to go travel around the city to communicate people about things that are being done. Because it's upsetting to me that things like the winter storm, East Side council members had to write a letter to the city manager's office to get some action done. So I think we really need to be looking at placing accountability in the places and getting that accountability out in front of the community.
All right. Tom?
I wasn't sure if Zoe was going to go first. So this is really critical. This is how we shape our city, and so I think it's a really important question. One of the things I think is very important with this is that the council members really need to be connected with the community well, so that when there are important decisions made, that they can bring people out for those meetings at those key times, and not necessarily wasting their time on other things, which is making sure that we have 10 speakers lined up on a critical issue. I've seen council members, and I can start naming names, who are incredibly effective with that recently, and that's a big way to get it done. Another thing is we really need to reform, like we have the neighborhood, I don't know how familiar you are with this, we have neighborhood associations and we have neighborhood planning teams. Neighborhood associations are just sort of informal organizations. They have not much regulatory meaning. Neighborhood planning teams actually shape the plans for individual neighborhoods. They've been kind of put on the shelf, but they still exist. I'm on the Upper Boggy Creek neighborhood planning team. I'm one of the 3 renters in the city who's on the neighborhood planning team. Those things need to be reformed as well. If council members are going to be listening to neighborhood associations, we need to know what the makeup is. Do you have democratic elections? Do you have what's your renter percentage on there? And especially the neighborhood planning teams, those we absolutely need to regulate. We need to regulate better. The Upper Bog Creek neighborhood planning team has a structure that was set up 15 years ago and makes no sense whatsoever. It's I could go into it, but not in that amount of time. So those are the big ones. Other thing is I absolutely want to be out in the district. I want to make sure that I am at the meetings where you all are at, because that's how you can have access. It's hard to make time out of your day to go downtown, even though you live in District 9. It's not that far away, but man, it's hard. So I want to make sure that I'm out there and talking with the people and learning what they need.
All right. So.
13 years ago, before I was even in District 9, I was moving here as a student with the goal to get an education and start the next chapter of my life. In that time, I met my wife in District 9. She was also a student at UT. So we've gotten married, and we've started a family, that as of now is myself, my wife, and a cat, in District 9, and I've pursued a career in District 9 from the beginning. I've shared during this race that I'm the only renter and would join the 2 lone voices of renters on council. Part of reforming the process to better account for the needs of low-income and disenfranchised demographics most impacted by our city's housing crisis is by electing renters who are and have actually lived the experiences of the rising cost. Just this past year, my wife and I learned that our rent was going up by over $750, an experience uniquely enabling me to be unafraid to take hard votes on the dice and fiercely advocate for affordability, because I shared an experience of many others in our city who may not be able to afford to live here much longer without action. That's a policy failure, one that can be addressed not only through representation on the dais, but also in appointments to commissions in our city. Students, renters, BIPOC residents, and other members of historically underrepresented groups across our city need equal representation in government bodies and have voices that are needed in more than just siloed spaces like the College Student Commission or the Human Rights Commission. Since this question was posed by the West Campus Neighborhood Association, I want to end by commenting the leadership of students already advocating and pulling up seats at tables not previously set for them, like those who created the West Campus Neighborhood Association to give voices to our young residents in our city. And as the only candidate here with the endorsement of Texas College Democrats, I will be a fierce advocate for student renters who uniquely cannot afford to be priced out of their college town. Thank you.
All right, and this one I guess I'll let Zoe go first. So Guadalupe Street between Republic Square and UT Mall is the most transit-rich corridor in the city today. Soon it will be the spine of the entire Project Connect system. The implementation of transit-oriented development zones around Guadalupe and other stations will be crucial to the success of Project Connect, as well as our city's climate and housing goals. These TOD zones will be on the council agenda in 2023. What is your vision in this policy area, especially as it relates to housing? And this is from the Downtown Austin Neighborhood Association.
Sorry. Excuse me. Oh, here.
As the only candidate in this field who lives in downtown Austin, improving connectivity to the rest of the city while fostering affordability is critical. If I'm elected, I look forward to being able to walk to work, and I hope that's something that we can create more opportunities for in our city as we look to tackle the climate crisis. Downtown is set to be the heart of Project Connect, and Council's Equitable Transit-Oriented Development, ETOD, said it'd be key to fostering walkable, climate-friendly density that is affordable for working Austinites. One critical component of the TOD zones that the next council will be addressing is the incorporation of community feedback into planning. As council allocates anti-displacement funds and plans station designs, it's important that we listen to community feedback, but we also must ensure that our systems of community input are properly representative of the community. Not everyone has the resources or time to attend hours-long meetings on weeknights, and those who do skew privileged and less representative of our diversity as a whole. Gathering feedback is important, and I'm looking forward to hearing perspectives from Dana as we move forward. But we also can't lose sight of the historic inequities that our community feedback process has created. But demographically represented feedback will be extremely beneficial to allocate anti-displacement funds and work on station plans. That said, we must ensure that we put forward a strong plan and prioritize efficiency so that we can deliver Project Connect as close to on time and on budget as possible. We can expand the highly successful University Neighborhood Overlay, UNO, program into majority student areas not currently covered. We can build on the recently passed BMU2 plan to bring climate-friendly density to more parts of downtown not currently covered, with the reforms to compatibility and parking mandates that can ensure more homes get built.
All right. Ben, I've lost track. I'm trying to be fair.
So this question is great because Project Connect really presents our biggest opportunity for building housing that we're going to have in a generation. And that corridor mentioned in the question is kind of the potential crown jewel of housing right there. It's really from there straight down to downtown. And so we need to make sure that we're building a lot of housing associated with it, that we're getting folks from the housing onto the train without the need to have a car, that there is affordable housing and market rate housing so that we actually have diversity in those units. And you know, I know this is, it's not a given is the thing, is that there's going to be a lot of pushback around how that's actually implemented. You know, there's going to be a robust feedback process as we just heard about. So we need to make sure that we have folks on council that are determined and dedicated to getting this implemented and implemented in a way that's equitable. This really has an opportunity to be an amazing walkable, bikeable, mixed-use transit corridor straight to downtown, and we're not going to get another opportunity to do that. So, yeah.
Joe?
I just today came back from a business trip in New York. I was in New York yesterday for about 24 hours, and then before that I was in LA for about 36 hours for the same thing for work. And I bring that up because LA, obviously, I rented a car driving around the city. New York, on the other hand, obviously has a subway system, and you just see the differences in what types of ecosystems are built from those scenarios. And so when I think about transit-oriented development, I think about my time living in Washington, D.C. After college, where whether you made $300,000 or $400,000 a year or $3 a day, you would take the metro if you could. And I think we need to be thinking about Project Connect. I mean, we're not going to really get the physical benefits of that for many years, but we can start getting a lot of the cultural benefits that we need as a city. And I say that because District 9, inherently being the urban core of the city, it's going to be a place where the cost of living here is going to be pretty prohibitive for a lot of people just naturally because of the proximity to downtown. And so we need to be thinking about transit as a method of getting people in, the ingress, egress of the city, to go and support the live music scene on Red River, to go down to Rainy Street, to go to live music and different events downtown, to go support the Central Library and things like that. So I'm thinking about it from a sense of, yes, the development around the transit is incredibly important. I think, oh, by the way, I'm sorry, sidebar, point of correction, Zoe has mentioned that he's the only renter in the race, and I know that I'm a renter. I also believe Tom's a renter, so I just want to make sure that that's communicated. But I think it's really important that we think of this. I think that Project Connect is a great housing opportunity for us, but I actually think that the real lift that we're going to see for this generation from a housing standpoint is going to be when we decide to update the land development code. I think that's going to be what's going to unlock the greatest opportunity. But I think Project Connect, what it can do is it can be kind of a gateway to communicating the benefits to the city many years in advance of people actually taking a ride on the rail. So I'm really a big fan of transit as a lever of allowing people to access the best parts of the city, even if they don't necessarily live in District 9. And I think that we need to be thinking about that more and more because we're a growing city. Everyone's not going to be packed into this one district. So in part, I think that being on city council is, you're going to be serving the district, but you're also going to be a board member in a way for the city. You're going to need to be thinking about transit-oriented development for the entire city and what that means in terms of getting people in and out and connecting people. So I'm really focused there.
Tom?
Yeah, that particular part of town has a great opportunity. It's going to be a huge public investment, and we can count the amount of money that's going in there. Plus, that'll be the center. From there, you can take transit outward pretty easily. The other thing too is there's a huge opportunity for a lot of private investment to go through there, and I really believe that. I mean, there's a lot of money that's going through Austin. I mean, billions. And I think it's really critical that we shape that private investment toward ensuring that people of different backgrounds are able to live here. Again, working class, people of color, people with disabilities, and students. I mean, I could go on, but I just mean, like, we shouldn't be building a downtown. Right now, our downtown doesn't have a whole lot of affordable housing. I think people put maps together and there's like, it's like you got the Capitol, with the place on 11th Street, the Capitol Flats or something like that. So we need to look for opportunities in that part of downtown. I think there'll be a lot of good findings that come out of the ETOD process that Project Connect is doing. I think that this is an example where it's really important to look at good processes and not necessarily as a council member dictate exactly what's going to happen, but actually learn the wisdom of community members of what needs to go into those ETODs. Beyond, I know the question was more specifically about housing, but I think it was more general. So the other thing I would say too is right now Guadalupe is as some people call it, a car sewer. It's just all about cars. If you're trying to walk there, it's not very pleasant. So we should transform that area into a place that is walkable and is bikeable, has street trees, and that it's a place that if you live there, you actually want to be there on the street. And it's really important for the sake of creating a holistic community to ensure there's active uses for the 18 hours of the day, 18 hours, from 6 a.m. to midnight. So you have storefronts, so that there's cafes and so on and so forth, that people feel comfortable going down the street, and it creates more eyes on the street, and it's a natural way to keep crime and make people down and keep people safe.
All right, I think that's everyone, right? All right, this is from Rethink 35. will you publicly oppose expanding I-35? And will you support a comprehensive study into community alternatives, such as Rethink 35's proposal to reroute non-local traffic around town and replace I-35 with an urban boulevard, or Reconnect Austin's proposal to sink and cap I-35 through downtown with a boulevard? I guess we'll start, Joah, I think we're back to you.
Okay, sure.
I'm sorry.
I've already stated that I am opposed to the expansion of I-35. And I say that because not only is having an interstate highway going through the middle of the city, it's done immeasurable racial and socioeconomic generational harms to this city and this community, and people who aren't even living in Austin anymore. So honestly, we can't even really measure the damage of that in just measuring people in Austin, because so many people have been forced out of the city and displaced as a result of that historically. So I don't support the expansion of it. In terms of capping and creating a boulevard, I definitely need to see more numbers around that. And the numbers that I would be most interested in aren't the numbers around the cost side. It's actually the numbers around who's actually going to benefit from that from a spatial standpoint. And I think it's really important to we do a lot of economic impact studies, we do a lot of environmental impact studies, but I think that we don't really do a lot of impact studies around culture. And I think that's such a big ingredient to why Austin's special. And so I think we need to come up with ways to measure, what does this do for our musicians? What does this do for our communities of color? What does this do for our essential workers and our first responders? And those are the people who really feed the culture of this city. Feeling safe is a part of the culture of this city. And so essential workers that provide that, police officers, firefighters, the people that contribute to feeling safety, that's a part of the culture of Austin. And so I'm really interested in 35 alternatives that have really counted not just the dollars and the economic case around it, not just the environmental impact, but also the cultural impact. Because I talk every day to people who, they're nonprofit employees, they work at Zach Theater, I'm on their board, and they're in the affordability crisis in ways that many people in tech, for example, are not. I talk to people who are in the restaurant industry, same thing. And those are the people who are oftentimes aren't able to live in District 9, so they're priced out. And so right now, 35 may be a way that they get to their job. And so while I'm not a supporter of expanding 35, I also don't want to just pull it away in a way that we haven't fully measured, not just the economics cases for those individuals, but also culturally, like how does that change their likelihood of being able to get to work on time or getting downtown for a gig and things like that. So I really support the push around rethinking 35, but I think fundamentally it starts with not expanding 35, which I think even winning that battle would be success in a lot of ways.
Tom?
Sure. Again, I-35 presents a real opportunity with such a huge investment. It's going to be multiple billions of dollars and with any result, pretty much. I've worked a long time on I-35. I've been part of the working group for Reconnect Austin for years. And I know how tough it's been. It's a huge battle when you're going up against the state. Rethink, I'm so glad that Adam has taken this on and just bird dog this. I know it's not aspirational. It is, because it's not simply aspirational. It's a long shot, and I think it's a worthwhile long shot. So I'm really glad that Adam has put so much energy into this. It's very out there. People know about the Rethink concept. I absolutely, in my work with Red Line Parkway Initiative, I've also been on the Our Future 35 working group and other avenues. I've really taken two paths at the same time. One is, yes, Rethink is absolutely the best option, and that should be evaluated, and there should be a plan for how to make that happen, because I think Joe was referring to this. There are people who work in downtown Austin who still need to get there, and the only way they have to get there is by a car, right? So we need to address how are these still going to get to work, because you're going to reduce the capacity of someone on I-35. So the idea is you time it with the transit investments. You find other ways that people can get to work. But not everyone on that part of I-35 is going downtown. Most of those people are just driving right through it, right? So they can take a freeway that goes around, or they can find other ways to meet their needs other than driving all the way across town during the peak rush hour. So absolutely support Rethink. So on the other side, Reconnect Austin in other ways of like, yes, this is a state project. The state has really the control of moving this project forward. So let's make the best of that as possible. I think Reconnect is a great vision. I think the mistake that the state is going to make is that they're not going to actually do the Reconnect Austin vision, and it'll be really easy for a lot of people to oppose it, including my neighborhood association, Cherrywood, and others. And so the cap and stitch is like, okay, but again, the investments in that, hundreds of millions of dollars for parks that are going to be this big, and they're going to serve people that are right there. So it's a real, there's a lot of things that are making what this project that's being proposed and shaping up not look that great. And I just want to end on tactically how this is going to happen, because I think this is all important for all y'all in the room. Just as Project Connect had cost overruns, we're going to see early next year when TxDOT comes out with their plan for I-35, it's going to be much more expensive than they're expecting. That requires a vote at Campo, our metropolitan planning organization, in order to add the money to that project. Start doing your work and see if you can get up the votes for not having that go through. And you might be able to find some votes on Campo, but you have to get a majority if you're actually going to not make it happen. Or you can use that as leverage. And I'm putting that out there to everyone. I'd love to serve on Campo and be one of those votes against I-35.
So I live in Cherrywood, and so we're directly in the path of this proposed expansion. My 2-year-old son goes to Escolita de Alma, which is the wonderful elementary school there that is slated to be bulldozed if they expand the road by a proposed 10 lanes. So, I mean, that would just exacerbate a generational scar in our city. And so I met with Adam, I don't know, last week, a couple weeks ago, and I was like, your idea is amazing, but it seems like a long shot, and he was just so passionate about it, and so I just really respect the way that Rethink 35 is going about that process, super grassroots. I was really jazzed after that conversation. I still don't understand the frog on there. So it's frog.
There's a lot
okay, all right, get it. So I encourage that process to continue to play out. There really isn't a good explanation or defense for expanding a road to 20 lanes in the middle of American City in 2022. We know that road will fill up with cars as soon as it's done. At the same time, the current situation with the decks is not good. You know, there's terrible noise pollution, there's terrible vehicle pollution, it's very dangerous. Like, the current situation is not good, but that doesn't mean we just have to accept exactly what TxDOT comes back with. So, you know, I also communicate with the Cherrywood Neighborhood Association, and they've been great. They've been on this and talking about it and have proposals around a cap from 32nd Street to 38th and a half, and you know, TxDOT is taking that and doing whatever they will, and they'll come back, and we'll see where they're at. But I think that is, I'm very encouraged by the community going out and pushing, and you know, we can't just accept whatever they give us. That will be a 50+ year, you know, decision that will take 10 years to make, and then it'll be full of cars. And so we can do better than that.
So,
even before being elected to city council, I have stood with advocates and experts calling for no wider and no higher on I-35 expansion. Though I unfortunately can't be there in person, I do have 3 parts to this answer. First, we need to humanize the impact of our policy. At meet and greets in Cherrywood and in conversations with residents and voters across the district, I have heard concerns about the displacement of homes and businesses because of the expansion plan. I-35 first toured through our community over 70 years ago, becoming the unspoken segregating line that persists to this day. But instead of healing generations of harm, this expansion plan would merely fortify the divide. Secondly, I also empathize that accessible and reliable transit should be a good for this city, and addressing congestion is part of that. However, we can't solve congestion with 1950s planning. We've known about induced demand for half a century, yet we refuse to learn the lesson of the Katy Freeway and other expansion projects that only worsen congestion. TxDOT wants to spend $5 billion on a project that relies on junk science and only will take us further from meeting our climate goals. Finally, if we want to reduce congestion, we must focus on ensuring that Project Connect can be delivered as close to on time and on budget as possible, with investments in equitable transit-oriented development so that people can have affordable homes near quality transit. The congestion our city faces today is a result of working class people being priced out of the urban core. but still having to commute to downtown for work, lowering take-home pay, and increasing the cost of the goods and services our essential workers facilitate. If elected, I will support a comprehensive study into the various community alternatives to TxDOT's plan, including the Rethink 35 and Reconnect Austin plans. Even a partial implementation of either plan would open up a brand new north-south transit corridor and create acres upon acres of brand new land virtually out of thin air that the city could utilize for affordable transit-oriented housing development.
All right. This one is from Aura. In light of the recent lawsuit regarding the protest rights of landowners that has derailed the code rewrite, what is the best path forward to address our severe lack of housing? So I'm guessing, any specific?
Well, first of all, what do y'all think about a 2-minute response on this one?
All right, go ahead.
No, I mean,
We've all been blown by the 1 minute the whole time.
We're definitely going to stop one. I'll start and see where it goes, but because this is a huge question. This is the question that I see people talk about online all the time of like, what is the next step we take, and so on and so forth. And so none of us are going to be able to, I'll put it this way, I'm not going to be able to explain the full answer in 60 seconds. But what I will say is that we need to look for as many opportunities for expanding housing capacity as possible. Go ahead. So my mantra in talking with people around the community on various sides of this issue is that we need to build more housing. We need allow to build more housing. We need to build up more income-restricted housing, and we need to build subsidized housing. And I'm finding almost no disagreement on that with some people that I hear some people in this room sometimes vilify. And I think that might be surprising. So I think that there are some people who do disagree with some of the aspects of that, don't get me wrong. So I think the key is to keep that guide star that we need more units. And so how can we get there? It's gonna be a combination of, say multiplexes on all SF3. SF3 is the land type, land use type that is in the urban core generally. So currently you can only build a duplex plus an ADU. And if you can expand it to 4, 5, or 6 units, you'll be able to allow for more affordability. We need to look for other opportunities along corridors and so on. But the point is a lot of these are going to require 6 votes out of 11. Some are going to require 9 votes out of 11, simply because there can be a lawsuit against them, and a ballot petition and a lawsuit. So we need to look for those different opportunities. I think it would be great to come up with a strategy for whoever gets elected among the community, because we're going to need all your help. And I want to leave it on one last point, and that is, this is going to require, I think we need to do it quickly too, because there's people who are unhoused. There are people who are being displaced from our city to another city that they never planned to move to, simply because they can't. They're working, but they can house themselves, but their rent, like my rent, went up 18% this year. So like when your rent goes up that much, you might end up having to move way out of the city or just to another city. So time is of the essence, right? And so we need to have most of this wrapped up in 2023.
Centennial of the disastrous 1920. As we approach the centennial of the disastrous 1929 city plan, which set us on the path to becoming the economically and racially segregated city we see today, it's past time for our city to have a reckoning. We need to ask ourselves, what kind of city do we want to be in 2029? The framework of the 1929 city plan echoes across our city to this day, and it's past time to dismantle its damage. We can begin by ending our exclusionary zoning and allowing gentle density and missing middle housing in more parts of our urban core. Some of our most historic and cherished neighborhoods in District 9, such as Hyde Park and Bolden Creek, would be illegal to build under our current code. Walking down any given street in Hyde Park, and you'd never guess that anyone would view the duplexes, fourplexes, and small apartment complexes as anything but integral to the neighborhood character. But that character only exists because those neighborhoods predate the costly parking mandates and our compatibility standards, which are among the most restrictive of their kind in the nation. As your candidate for Austin City Council, I firmly believe that we must think bigger too, and build on Council's highly successful Affordability Unlock program to allow climate-friendly density while economically integrating our neighborhoods. With Project Connect on the horizon, we must initiate transit-oriented zoning standards beginning within a half a mile of light rail and rapid bus stops. And I know these reforms will be difficult to enact, and we need to find a way to avoid giving a veto over homes to people who are at no risk of displacement. As a community organizer and someone with experience working in city governments as small as Kyle and as big as Houston, I have the experience needed to have these difficult conversations and make headway on essential reforms by grounding it in those most vulnerable to the consequences of inaction. Some of this can be achieved by simplifying and updating existing zoning categories, such as making it easier to build multifamily density, allowed under the SF3 category, and eliminating many of our needless restrictions on ADU construction that can help alleviate displacement and foster intergenerational households. Some of it can be achieved through reforming elements of the code that aren't strictly rezonings and therefore are immune from some of the veto threat. Lastly, we must look inward to our city's resources, supercharging the land that's already zoned for density by beefing up staffing and permitting and development to expedite approvals, simplifying the site plan review process on missing middle projects, and building climate resilient affordable homes on existing city land.
So I absolutely agree with Zoe and Tom that we just need to build a lot more housing. And I think to the sort of crucial element of this question is like, we can't let a filibuster stop us from passing housing policy. Like ultimately, like we need to pass as many pro-housing related policies as possible. And if they go get petitions for them, then we'll see what happens in court. I think, again, you talk about this a lot in your newsletter, it's questionable whether some of these things are even petitionable. And so we know the Senate doesn't pass anything. And so if we allow 2 to 3 members who we know we're not going to get things through on, that's just a reality, to hold back the process, we're not going to pass housing. So I would say we just need to get creative, get ready to pass things on 7 to 4 votes, and pass as many pro-housing policies as possible.
Zoe touched on something that I think is really important. He mentioned the word experience. And I actually think from here, Zoe, Tom, Ben, myself, we're all going to collectively, I think, vote differently on a lot of different housing related things than the current representative in District 9. So preaching to the choir here. What I would say though is the experience that I think is relevant here is in looking at how do we actually get big things done here in this city. I look at Project Connect in 2020, and even more recently I look at Qadri Lofts. And the thing that I see in both of those projects is, yes, a lot of people were involved, but what I see is that a coalition was built, and the coalition wasn't dependent on votes. The coalition was being built by people in the community who had a shared passion around getting something done, and the votes were there. I think Project Connect and Qadri Lofts both benefited from having Black and brown people at the front of those tables.
Why don't you tell them what Qadri Lofts is?
Oh, sorry. Qadri Lofts is it's a housing project, permanent supportive housing project that's going to be in the Hancock neighborhood. That just won. I think it got 10 votes on council.
All 3 readings.
As did VMU2. So you see 2 cases of 10 vote situations, and I think the reason why is because there's coalitions making that happen. So I think it's really important to think about that, because you're not just electing someone because of how they're going to vote, because we're all going to probably vote pretty similarly on land development code discussions. I think you're also thinking about who is someone that could really put together a coalition, and it really needs to be a coalition that's really inclusive and diverse. And I think that in a lot of cases, the council member is someone that's supporting the efforts of the community. And I think that we've seen Qadri Lofts and Project Connect both are examples where I don't look at those projects as being something that was spearheaded by the council member as much as ones that were supported by council members. I see the community stepped up and did what the city needed. And so I think in a lot of ways, that's where I lean on my experience as an entrepreneur, touching in the nonprofit community, the music community, the restaurant community, and figuring out ways to engage these communities, to create really inclusive coalitions to make these big things happen. And then the votes will come after the coalition exists.
All right. I guess, are we going to take a break now?
I think that's a good time for intermission.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a 15-minute intermission. All of our wonderful partners will have a chance to come up and give a quick speech about themselves and call to action for why you should care about what they're about. And now's a good time for everyone to get water, snacks, use the restroom, give these guys a break. Yeah, so I guess I will start off in just a second here. So howdy, my name is Zach Faddis, and I'm the president of Aura. Aura is an organization that fights for abundant housing for all Austinites and a transportation system that is sustainable, safe, reliable, and not car dependent. Said enough here tonight, but the cost of housing in Austin is far too high. We are seeing shortages of bus drivers, lifeguards, and teachers because working class people are struggling to afford to live in the city. The reasons are well known. In much of our city, we prohibit all but the most expensive form of housing, a detached single-family home on a large lot. Our housing policy is a devastating failure, and we need a city council brave enough to fix it. Unfortunately, this current system favors the voices of the most privileged landowners who fear a departure from the status quo more than they fear rising housing prices. Aura is building a movement to create a city that welcomes all, that provides economic opportunity, freedom of mobility, and abundance to all who wish to call Austin home, both old residents and new. Step one in this vision is electing a pro-housing, pro-transit majority city council. In November, 5 council seats, plus the mayor, will be up for re-election. Aura will be holding forums, endorsing candidates, and then doing our damnedest to get those candidates elected. We need help. We need your help. Go to our table back there to join our movement, get out to our chat rooms, come hang out at our events, and help us get some folks elected. Any other partner organization wants to do a spiel about themselves? Fan, everybody. Roger Cobbin, a fan.
Woo! Hi, everybody. Friends of Austin Neighborhoods. It says Friends of Austin Neighborhoods is a coalition of neighborhood associations and individuals like yourselves, reclaiming the word neighborhood for the voices of inclusion. Some of you have probably heard this and not really paid much attention. But a lot of times when city officials or people going before City Hall or going before the city council members talk about issues, they say stuff like, let's go see what the neighborhoods think. Have you ever considered what that means? What does it mean for a neighborhood to think? What they really mean is let's go see what the vocal people who are against virtually everything have to say. So Friends of Austin Neighborhoods aims to reclaim the word neighborhood so that it no longer is exclusionary, but is instead inclusive, representative, and for improvement, not the status quo. And it's free to join, for individuals to join. Neighborhood associations can join as well. We have about 18 neighborhood associations throughout Austin. And we'd welcome your individual membership if you would like to join, and it's free. You can go to atxfriends.org and sign up there. Enjoy the cause. Thanks.
Good evening, my name is Hill Abel, and I am with Safe Streets Austin. Safe Streets Austin is the new active transportation advocacy organization in Austin. We are a result of a merger between Bike Austin, Walk Austin, and elements of Vision Zero ATX. And our mission is to restore the streets, urban trails, and all public open spaces so that it's more livable, safer, and more amenable for a healthy way of life in Austin, Texas. Our mission is to work closely with the city by monitoring the implementation of the build-out of our bikeways, our all ages and abilities bikeways, our sidewalks, and our urban trails. The city is doing an incredible job, and the citizens are supporting this work in such an incredible way. Great example is the passage of the mobility bond. We have over $500 million to work with for bicycle facilities and new sidewalks, urban trails. The city is implementing those, but they need somebody that's bird dogging all of that work And that is really one of our core missions, because we feel like it takes community input to really keep the city focused on what's most important. And we encourage you to support this work, join in with us, because it's truly a grassroots movement. Thank you.
Hi everybody, Jay Crossley with Farmland City, and we actually work across Texas public policy. We work at the city level, sometimes at the county level, at the Metropolitan Planning Organization level, sometimes at the state, on a suite of issues that make sense to us together. And our major projects are Vision Zero Texas, where we lead the movement to end traffic deaths across the whole state. Decide Texas, which is our project to get equitable decision-making into the Texas transportation decision-making system. And then Texas Friends of Transit, because basically we need a lot more transit. And finally, though, 50 million Texans is really our smart growth, long-term sustainability project that's focused on major metro regions, and we've been focused on this major metro region for a while now. And with the idea that we will take the things that work here and go to the other metro regions, although we also do work in Houston, Dallas, and elsewhere. And so we've been doing a lot on the Land Development Code. We host with a bunch of other partners in this room the Austin Parking Reform Coalition that seeks to get rid of the concept of costly parking mandates here in Austin and across the state eventually. And so, very excited, and thank you all so much for being here, and see you soon.
Nice shirt.
Hello. My name's Adam Greenfield. I'm one of the founders and I'm executive director of Rethink 35. We are a grassroots, rapidly growing community movement to stop the incredibly backwards and ridiculous proposal to expand I-35, a practice that has failed for best part of a century, and TxDOT is proposing today. Not only are we going door to door to hundreds and thousands of residents across Austin to oppose that, but we have a positive vision of reimagining the center of Austin as a revitalized urban boulevard, a world-class boulevard that instead of people avoiding I-35 like they do today, they will actually come from other places and from around town to visit this beautiful new place. So we need you to get involved. If you support us, it's not good enough for you to just quietly support us. We need you to sign our petition, we need you to buy a t-shirt, we need you to get a yard sign, and more importantly, we need you to show up when we give you the word. Please participate, this can be done. When we've gone door to door meeting hundreds of residents, we see almost universal opposition the expansion of I-35 and almost universal support for the positive alternative that we're providing. So please join us. Thank you very much, and thank you to the organizers of this event.
All right, who's going first this time? You guys figure this out. All right, this question comes from Safe Streets. During the pandemic, Austin saw the rapid installation of protected bike lanes on Congress, street space allocation on the South Pleasant Valley Road, and the popular citywide Healthy Streets program, popular among residents, not the transportation department. At the same time, cities around the world are seeing new possibilities how we use streets. Do you support this trend, and what specific possibilities do you see in Austin? You got any ideas for?
Yes, I support the trend. When I started riding my bike to work about 10 years ago, it completely changed my life. Like, you see the city in a completely different way. We know it's good for the environment, it's good for physical health, it's also kind of good for mental health. And we know these things are popular even if there's initial pushback. Like Councilmember Riley, who's here, there was so much pushback against taking some parking spaces away to build a patio on Congress, and now those things are everywhere, and people love those things. And so I love the initiative here. We see this in cities and other cities in Europe and the United States. Specific opportunities we have. We passed a giant bond, so why don't we connect our urban trail network, our sidewalks, as Tom mentioned earlier, they go to nowhere now, that's not good. We can connect those sidewalks. And we have a lot of money to do that, and it's rapidly depreciating, so we should start spending it now. Beyond that, I think whatever happens with 35, we need to improve our ped and bicycle crossings and sort of associated infrastructure there, and there's going to be a lot of money put into that. We need to make sure that we're not just prioritizing vehicles. And also Project Connect. That is, I'll shout out to Tom again on the Red Line Initiative, creating a trail network that goes next to the Red Line. We have an opportunity along all of the new rail to create a lot of bike and ped-friendly infrastructure. If we ever are going to have a compact connected community, we have to get folks out of cars.
All right, who's next? Zoe's up.
Zoe's getting booted up.
So for 2016 mobility, we've seen the fruits of our 2016 mobility bond, as well as Prop B in 2020, that's funded a lot of mobility changes that we've seen expand the world of possibilities for a pedestrian-friendly and less car-dependent future in Austin. On council, I would work to expand the imagination of how we use streets to be sources of community hubs, from setting the possibility of pedestrianizing streets and neighborhoods as well as the drive near UT campus. As I mentioned in a previous answer, reforming city and regional policy goals to make our city more walkable and pedestrian-friendly is critical as we join other cities in reimagining a vision of multimodal transit. This includes increasing protected bike lanes, adding and expanding ADA accessibility to the remaining sidewalk curb cuts, and working with many of the experts in the crowd and at the organizations putting on this forum to develop innovative policy and design solutions that develop safe, attractive, and walkable places in District 9 across Austin. Finally, our campaign has highlighted studies that show assuring increased and improved street lighting across the city is not only critical to improving conditions for walking, biking, and using micromobility, but it is also a component to reimagining public safety, and is a reform that has empirically reduced violent crime by up to 80% in other urban cities.
Sure. Yeah. So healthy streets. Come back to the question. So one thing that y'all might not know is that healthy streets actually came out of a COVID initiative, because the idea was that there wasn't enough room on our sidewalks to be able to walk past people and still maintain 6 feet of distance. And so that was one thing. It ended up creating this opportunity for us to reimagine our public space. And it was a terrific opportunity. I appreciate Adam was instrumental in making sure that making this initiative happen. I think that's the real gem in the Healthy Streets Initiative. It's oftentimes our streets are seen as single-purpose places, just for cars or just from moving from one place to the next. And that's where I think where the value is in the Healthy Streets Initiative. So. And much like Ben mentioned, with Red Line Parkway Initiative, using these opportunities to create places where people can start to imagine their city from the inside out. So we should continue to do Healthy Streets Initiative. Also bring back Viva Streets, as it was called in Austin, which is otherwise known as Open Streets or Ciclovia. Again, just using these opportunities for reimagining our public space, because the streets make up the biggest chunk of our public space, about the same as parks.
Really great thoughts and ideas, and I'm honestly here thinking about differentiators in terms of what are things that aren't just going to be add-ons to all the great things everyone's already said. And so I think of 2 specific things. One, the city and the county also play a big role in thinking about economic development in terms of recruiting companies here, companies that move their headquarters here or satellite offices and such. I think we need to make mobility and reducing car dependency as a pillar of our economic development strategy. And I think that we need to start introducing that into all those conversations. So when we're talking to a Google or a Meta or any company, I think we should say that it's one of our priorities as a city to reduce the number of cars on the road. And so we're actually we're willing to have a better conversation with you about economic development if you're willing to have a better conversation with us about getting cars off the road and improving our mobility situation here in the city. So that's one thing I would focus on. The second is as you know, I haven't had a car in Austin. September will be 5 years for me, and I've made it work. And even got my wife to move here from LA. She's a musician, and we've made it. She doesn't have a car either, so we've made it work. And I think what I think about is we need to be thinking about not just who has comfort in doing things like biking and walking, which we all have no privilege, so we definitely are a lot more comfortable on bikes and on foot in the city than most women probably. Even though, yes, Austin's a safe city, but on a bike, it's not as safe. So I definitely would probably use that economic development conversation to put together a coalition of the private industry and also public officials and people in the community, specifically focus on how do we make these streets and these bike lanes and things safer for women. Because I actually think that if you get a lot more women biking to work or biking in the community and feeling safe and talking about how safe they feel biking, you're going to get a lot more people in general biking. So I would really lean into that because I think that's a low-hanging fruit thing that hasn't been done yet that we can do a lot right now. And I think that would make a big difference.
Right. Now we are at our last prepared. This one is short and sweet. This is from Friends of Austin Neighborhoods. Apartments are currently banned in much of Austin's urban core. Where in the urban core should they remain illegal, and why?
I saw this question, and I was like, wow, you're just for the jugular. Here's, again, I think all of our housing decisions, all of our policy decisions need to start with people. So when I think about should apartments be legal or illegal in a place, what I think about is who would be living in them. So the way that I would try to advocate on council to get 9, 10 other council members to agree with a policy that unlocks more housing and the ability for more apartments to be built in different parts of the city is to make it about the people. So when I read the question about legal versus non, whatever for apartments, what I saw was, should it be illegal for police officers or paramedics to live in a certain part of town? Should it be illegal for a musician to live in a certain part of town? Should it be illegal for a student to live in a certain part of town? The answer is emphatically no. And so what we now have to think about is what kind of housing would be available for them in these communities. And so that's where you start breaking down the barriers, right? Because I think in a lot of ways when we use the same language as people who oppose a lot of these housing projects, for example, we play their game. When we're talking about buildings versus buildings, we don't win those conversations. But when we make the conversation about people versus buildings, I think we have a much better chance. And so a lot of what I want to do, what I try to do with my campaign so far is go out there and talk to the musicians, talk to the people who work in restaurants and bars, talk to the people who are in the film industry or work at nonprofits, because those are the people who I think should be the face of any conversation around land development code updates, housing policy, and I just think we do it enough, and I think we do ourselves a disservice by not talking about the people that this stuff is for. So when I think about housing especially, I think about my mom working 2-3 jobs my whole childhood. Thankfully, we had a $380 and then eventually a $440 a month duplex, but duplexes like that don't exist in all these parts of Austin, and much less, multiplex apartments. So I think it's really important for us to think about the people first, and I think that'll break down a lot of the barriers and allow a path for progress.
Who's next?
If we're going to build the housing we need, multifamily has got to be a part of that. And it's kind of ironic because in some of our most iconic sort of established neighborhoods, like this neighborhood or Hyde Park, there are apartments everywhere, and they're mixed in with old homes and duplexes and all these things that we couldn't build now. And then we have the new Mueller development that has all of the diversity of housing, and everyone loves that area. And so these things are great when they exist, and unfortunately you can't replicate a lot of this stuff now. But I lived right around the corner from here for 5 years in it was a townhome, I guess. It was a divided old house. It was terrible, but it allowed me to live in this neighborhood and work in a restaurant, paying $500 a month in this neighborhood. And never could have afforded to do that if that wasn't the case. And so we need apartment complexes, we need duplexes, we need, if we want diversity in our neighborhoods, we need diverse housing options. If someone wants to move from a big house to a smaller house as they get older, they should have an opportunity to do that in their neighborhood. And so I don't think this necessarily has to be a controversial thing. I think we need to go out, we need to go to Hyde Park and say, look at what you have. This is great. People love this neighborhood. Like, let's be able to replicate that across the city.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think that it is, I appreciate Joah and Ben describing the why, because that is really an important thing. To get more support, whether it's community members or even other members of city council, we have to put that in front to know that we're not just doing this to get back at someone, even though it sounds like, sometimes we talk in that way online or sometimes in person. But really, the core of it is the affordability. And there's certainly other benefits to it as well. Climate action is important, so providing more housing in places where there already are services, people can walk, bike, take transit, and drive. But directly to the question, it's really a continuum because I believe there needs to be incremental change all over the city, right? Like we should allow, like, we're not, when you say apartments, when does an apartment begin? Is that when it becomes a 5-plex or when it becomes a 10-plex? And so I think that for increasing our housing supply, we should use all the tools in the box. And so I think that, when you look at SF3 and SF2, SF3 allows, again, a duplex plus an ADU as long as there's enough space in the lot, right? And then SF2 allows for, I believe, just this uniplex or what is single-family detached house, however you want to call it. So there should be more opportunity to build housing in those places. I think there's actually, in my conversations, again, people are like, well, yes, if a sixplex went in next door, they would find it a burden. But if that also meant that we were getting affordable housing in Austin, then they'd be like, yeah, that's just part of living in the city. The city goes through changes. So I think when we lead with what is the benefits, what are the outcomes we're trying to get to, what are the possible tools we have to get there, and then, yes, one of the tools is going to be simply upzoning across the city in some fashion. And the right numbers, I think, can be worked out through working with city staff, through community organizations, and so on. And
the question of legalizing housing is one on a lot of our minds, not only as policy advocates, but also as people affected by and witnessing the crossroads that our city is at. We know that a one-size-fits-all approach to housing reforms won't work. Buildings downtown won't match building patterns in more residential neighborhoods. I aim to work together with leaders across the district and experts around the city to innovate urban policy and housing plans that aid in the accessibility of housing in all parts of our expansive and multicultural district. Due to institutional obstructions to major zoning changes, our next council will be smart to remove restrictions on places where apartments are already legal, such as reforming compatibility rules and costly parking mandates. In addition, I would be open to building on Council's 2019 Affordability Unlock Plan and creating incentives for Capital A affordable housing that can help economically integrate our neighborhoods. If I'm fortunate of being elected to the Austin City Council, I would prioritize transit-oriented development beginning within a half a mile of our Project Connect corridors, including the rapid bus routes. We also must simplify the rules to allow missing middle projects in our urban core, such as ADUs, duplexes, row houses, and fourplexes. The policies we are able to enact will depend on the council we elect. Hopefully we have 9 housing-friendly council members after the November election so we can truly go big and meet the moment. But we also must be prepared to get creative and take tough votes to legalize abundant homes and end our dire housing crisis. Council's 20.
All right. Zach, do we have, otherwise I can improve. Okay.
You have some questions?
All right.
I got a lot of those questions. I like design.
Okay. All right.
Maybe give you
Okay. Well, actually, all right. Well, this will be here's one question that this has been a friendly crowd, obviously. Everybody's rah-rah housing and transit. That's not going to be your experience always during this campaign. So I was just wondering, imagine, the archetypal, skeptic of this. Someone says, I'm a longtime Hyde Park homeowner. I bought my house 40 years ago for $50,000, and I've seen so much change around me. And I bought into my neighborhood believing I was buying into a very specific character. And these things like the Hyde Park NCCD and my neighborhood plan gave me a sense of certainty about what my future would look like here. Who are you to tell me I need to accept this dramatic change?
So? So this is, as I'm talking to people in our neighborhood, this is something that comes up a lot. Folks who have voted for Kathy Tovo and really support her are still feeling the strains. I mean, we are at this point now where folks, property taxes are starting to really go up. I talked to one woman who wanted to build a back house to try to offset that, but she was really concerned about the costs and sort of process of doing so. Folks who, they may live here, but their kids can't live here. I think we have to approach these conversations with empathy because, it's rational to not, welcome change in certain ways, right? Like that's rational. If we don't accept that, that's dehumanizing to people's feelings. But we also need to go out and make a strong case for why, changing building types or something can actually help the people here, as kind of Joe has outlined really well. So I think the sort of urgency of the moment is kind of an opportunity. Again, like everywhere I go, folks, whether they own, rent, or in the market, like they're feeling the strains, and they're open to sort of acknowledging that the status quo is just not working. And so that creates a lot of opportunity for change.
Go ahead.
Should I go ahead? You want to go ahead?
No,
okay. I feel like it would actually kind of help to have an actor that plays on their side of it.
You gonna stand in and be like,
So I think these conversations really vary depending on whether you have a one-on-one conversation, a small group conversation, or a large conversation. And so I would say, I think empathy is really important. There, as Ben said, there's very few people out there who, in the community who I talk to or who speak up at meetings, who are truly ill-intentioned. I'll put it that way. Most of the people really think they're trying to do the best and do good for the community, right? And so you need to approach them in that way. And another thing too is that a lot of the concerns that are bringing up are real concerns. Change is a tough thing. I think again, leading with what the benefits are. There, in Austin, and I would just say, frankly, in District 9, people do want to, they do want to have an egalitarian city. They do want to have a diversity of people, diversity of incomes. They do believe that government can be an instrument toward providing those goods, and depending on in this case, we're talking about even deregulating, but it's just like government can help shape those things. Wanted to mention that this is actually a reason why some people talk about why not just get rid of zoning, it's not like Houston, but just get rid of zoning, just allow yourself to build everything anywhere. And I think one of the problems with that is it would be incredibly disruptive. And I do take to heart that incremental change is the way to go. But when I say incremental change, I don't mean just a little bit of housing here and there. We need to, again, keep the guide star of how many units do we need in different parts of town over time. That's a common language. That's a number, and we can talk about if we allow for SF3, that allows for 6 plexes. How many units is that expected to produce? We can come up with analysis. If we talk about the large quarters and the small quarters, well, this many more units on it. We can start to add those housing units up and have the conversation that way. So there will be a change in the interior neighborhoods, as it is with the existing housing land development code. But again, if you live in Hyde Park and you're living here for 40 years, you're going to be okay with a little bit of change over time. You still got your trees, you still got people around you.
I think about 2 specific things, and I think about these things because for the last over 20 years I've been serving on nonprofit boards. I was on the March of Dimes board in high school with the mayor of Killeen. And then from there, I've been the chair of the board for 8 Services of Austin, and I'm currently on the Zach Theater board and was on the Austin PBS board. And being in these different rooms, it's taught me a lot about working in rooms with people who may not share all your same beliefs and values, which I think is really important on council especially. And the two things I think about is benefits and benevolence. And the benefit side is very clear. People have to feel like there's something in it for them. And I think on housing, the pressure is on our emergency workers, it's on our service industry, it's on our artists and musicians, it's on our nonprofits. So I really think that the benefit that we can communicate to even the naysayer is very clear. The nonprofit you support is struggling because of this. The police department, the fire department, the EMS, they're suffering because of this. So the benefit to you is that you're going to have a safer city, you're going to have a more culturally rich city, you're going to have a more vibrant city, you're going to be able to go dine at a restaurant, it's going to have good staff, things like that. On the benevolent side though, and I've learned this actually even more from being an entrepreneur, especially being a black tech founder and pitching investors and a lot of people not being as willing to part with their money with someone who doesn't look like the next Mark Zuckerberg. And what I've learned is that for a lot of people, the benevolence part is really important because when you're talking about change, I think one of the things to help someone get over the hurdle of change is if you come at it from a historical perspective. And I think Zoe mentioned the 1929 plan, I think it's the 1928 plan, but we're coming up on the 100-year anniversary of that. And I think we have a real opportunity here to do some things around equity and inclusion that would really be generationally material in this city. I think when we have a lot of people in this city who they want to have their kids here, their grandkids here, so I really think there's an opportunity to really make a pitch to people to say, hey, this is the right thing to do is to further remove us from this very racially motivated 1928 city plan. And I think we have an opportunity these next several years, especially with this next council, to put some steps in place that eradicate those racially motivated pillars of our housing code. So I really think that it's very clear that people need to get the front of the benefit, and that change that really speaks to generations can kind of touch on the benevolence piece, because I think people in this city especially, you walk around, you see a lot of in this house signs, Black Lives Matter and all these different things. And I think we haven't done a good job on the housing front of putting it in front of those people and saying, this is how you actually implement that. I think Project Connect was actually an example of success there. They did that, and it worked. So I think we should do the same thing with housing.
All right. Let's see. How much time do we got left?
We have about 8 minutes.
All right. Should we just do closing statements? Or?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Okay. I'm sorry for the.
I did a box one that I thought
there was
readable and
okay. Okay. All right.
Doesn't seem like
this
rapid fire.
Yes. All right. These fights have been happening for years. What is about you that would finally win this battle? Yeah. Yeah. What makes you special?
So, I have served on my neighborhood association for quite a bit of the time that I've lived in Austin, and I do currently serve on the Upper Boggy Creek neighborhood plan. So I see the people who come to the meetings and don't want to see the new housing. And I definitely have friendly and cordial relationships, but I've learned over the years of what I've had the conversations with them over the years about the housing, and it's become much more of a crisis in the last 10 years. But even before, we talked about common goals and who we wanted to live, and that to make sure that we had we were welcoming to a diversity of people in our own neighborhood. So those are common values. I've also, with the nonprofit work I've done with Bike Austin, Walk Austin, Redline Parkway Initiative, Puma, Austin Outside, and there's probably a couple of other that I've forgotten. I've worked a lot with government agency staff. I've worked a lot with community leaders. I've had one-on-one conversations with people who don't want a bike lane on their street, whether they're a business owner or someone trying to sell their house. And those conversations need to be had. There's certain people that you need to focus on to diffuse what's going on. And those could be people in government staff, it could be other community leaders that you just can't ignore. And again, I want to get back to government agency staff. You can pass something with the majority vote on council, but unless you've done your homework behind it, to talk with the staff who might end up being obstacles for it, it's not necessarily going to go anywhere. It's been a conversation recently with an existing council member who knows that. They were like, yes, I talked with the director, talked all the way to whatever other person in the staff who really cares about this issue, is working on it full time, and may be an obstacle to it. But you want to talk it through with them and make sure that they're on board with how you're shaping it. And then again, I alluded to this, or I mentioned this earlier, that nexus between the council member and the council, the government agency staff, and then community groups. That is how, and I'll start mentioning names. So I feel like that's why Greg Qadri was so incredibly effective. That was a big part of it. When he wanted something passed, he cut dozens of people to come out to a meeting, and I've done that on the other side of it. I've been the person in the community group that comes out when Chris Riley's at Campo, or other decisions for other council members. Greg Qadri actually, making sure that I speak up at one of his meetings. And that was actually I'll just point this out. There was if you are glad that people who work at the airport or people who live in Del Valley can now walk or bike out of their neighborhood into central Austin, that was a Campo decision roughly 8 years ago. First was on Campo at that time, Sarah Eckhart was, Judge Sam Bisco was there. Got Judge Sam Bisco to start talking about, yes, are we going to expect that people are going to walk and bike in the same lane as highway traffic? And immediately that project, which was going toward having no sidewalk, no shared use paths or anything, just a highway, turned into now we have a shared use path and people can actually go that way. And so it was critical to have that conversation on DICE. It was critical to have the community group there. That's what I offer.
Well, I guess I'll just first off say, I respect Zoe through the microphone as well as the two guys here. I mean, I think that this has been an awesome conversation, and so it's really cool to see young folks talking about living in this district. Personally, having grown up here as someone, family didn't have a whole lot of money, and just kind of experiencing that, working through college, working at a restaurant for 7 years, and kind of understanding what it's like to make $2.13 an hour and have to live in Austin, which is not really, I don't even know how that's possible now. That perspective is not in council right now. I think that's a very valuable perspective to have. My folks always pushed their kids into public service, and so I went to study government at UT, and then I went back to the LBJ school and studied local policy, because I believe that this is where we can actually get stuff done. I worked in the city auditor's office, which is a wonderful group of people, very challenging job. And you get to see how the city works and often how it doesn't work, and seeing how those departments are siloed and opportunities for doing it better. And I got an opportunity to work as a policy advisor to council, albeit somewhat briefly, but really seeing how policy is passed and how that works, and going door to door and talking with staff and actually passing a resolution that can be implemented into an ordinance. That process is not intuitive, and it's Byzantine, and I think that it's important to have experience in that. I've also done a lot of work in the community. I also have served on the Cherwood Neighborhood Association, mentored through Austin Partners in Education, volunteered for many progressive candidates and causes, and knocked on tons of doors. I care deeply about this city and this state. I truly believe that the only way that we're going to see the change we want is if we have representatives that are out talking to people, knocking on doors, engaging with the community, not just the folks that can go down to City Hall. And we have a 2-year-old son, and that, for me, has changed the way I think about this city, and thinking about, can this be a place where he can grow up and he can choose, actually afford to live here if he so chooses, and that gives me a lot of motivation of staying here and fighting for this city, because Austin is worth fighting for. It's an amazing place, and we have a huge opportunity now. So I'm very privileged to be in this race, and I appreciate it all.
I'll just share a quick anecdote. In 2009, I tried to Cheryl Cole was on the council at the time, and I tried to get a meeting with her for several months, her being the lone black member of the council at the time. Was unable to get a meeting with her, but months later, late that year, because because of going out into the community and I was literally going to music shows 6 nights a week. When Cheryl Cole's office needed to appoint someone to the Austin Music Commission to advise the council and mayor on music issues, my name was the one that came up. The first time that she ever met me was asking me to serve on the Austin Music Commission, so I ended up being the vice chair of the Music Commission and designating Red River as a cultural heritage district. And similarly, a few years later, I was the board chair for AIDS Services of Austin. The first time I met Greg Kassar or Kathy Tovo or Mayor the first time I met these people was when I was the chair of the board and we were opening a clinic to help people affected by HIV and AIDS. Recently, my friend Elias, he has a skate shop called No Comply over off 12th Street, and they got a historic notice saying they were going to get demolished. He didn't know who his council member was. He called me as if I was and asked for my help. And so I helped put together a group of people, and we ended up getting over 4,000 emails sent into the Historic Commission meeting to stop that demolition from happening. And now he has a great relationship with his landlord, who happens to be ACC. So for me, what's leading me into this work is service. The politics of it, I know that's an important piece of it in terms of getting things done, but to me, I just look at what I've done in this community is very much leaning into serving others, and that's how people know me. I hope that people don't just know me as a candidate. I think if you talk to people who do know me, they're going to talk about the way that I show up in the community, and I really think that we need to have that in council. We haven't had that in council. Everyone in this city who has any kind of political inkling knows who Kathy Tobo is, but then go a level deep and talk to the person who's the barista, talk to the musician. They don't know the longest serving council member in the city. And so we desperately need to change that, and that's the thing that I intend to do.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry.
Is this thing on? Okay, cool. I just wanted to once again thank all the amazing groups for putting on this very important event, this very important forum. It's vital that we have these tough conversations if we want to get to the point where Austin is a city that works for everyone. And I'm confident that we will get to that point. I want to also thank Jack for moderating. And I can't see everyone in the crowd right now, but I'm so thankful for everyone coming to this space tonight and bringing in their energy and their passions. I'm once again so sorry that I couldn't be there in person, but my team is there. They have business cards with my phone number and my email. I check every email I get. And I also answer my texts fairly quickly, so please don't hesitate to reach out. A lot of the impacts that were discussed today are grounded in policy, and it's very important that we also remember that that policy directly touches everyone in this city. I would be remiss to not also talk about the importance of representation at cities of government, from bringing equitable appointments to city commissions, but also making sure that we have that representation on the dais. And Austin, as a city, has never elected a South Asian, and has only ever elected an Asian once in its history, and has never elected someone from the Muslim faith. And though I'm not running for those reasons, it is extremely important to have those conversations. Why I am running, though, is to bring responsive and intentional policy to our city and accountability to our government. So once again, thank you everyone for coming out today. I look forward to the many conversations we'll have between now and November. And once again, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to have one-on-ones. I'd love to talk to you all. Thank you once again.
All right, let's give our candidates a round of applause.
I think we'd be remiss without, I just wanted to give a quick plug to Jack, our wonderful moderator. Thank you so much, Jack. Jack is a wonderful local journalist here. He does some stories for, I believe, the Austin Monitor, but no, okay. Not anymore, but his primary gig is he runs a daily local newspaper called the, I don't want to get it wrong again.
The Austin Politics Newsletter.
The Austin Politics Newsletter. It is a It is his own journalism outlet. You pay a subscription service to receive a daily newsletter from Jack 5 days a week, most weeks. It's been a great, wonderful resource. I subscribe. I'm sure many people do here and can attest how wonderful it is. You should all subscribe. Thank you. Those who recorded all these answers while he had COVID, which is pretty cool.
Wait, one more. Zach.
Oh.
Also thanking St. Luke's and Mary here for so kindly and graciously hosting us.